The holographic display flickered to life in the center of the Galactic Xenobiology Institute's advanced classroom, casting an eerie blue glow across the faces of 37 students from 18 different species. Professor Kethmer, a tall, crystalline being whose translucent form refracted light into rainbow patterns, gestured with one of his forearms toward the projection. Today we conclude our study of apex predators. His voice resonated through the universal translator, creating harmonic frequencies that made the Zephyrian student's antenna twitch nervously. Behold the shadow maw of Kepler 442b. The hologram showed a creature that defied comprehension, a writhing mass of darkness with eyes like dying stars, capable of phasing through solid matter and hunting entire space fleets. Several students instinctively moved away from the projection. The shadow maw's recorded kills numbered in the millions, entire colonies reduced to empty husks in a single night. Note the adaptation patterns, Professor Kethmer continued, his voice carrying the weight of academic authority. Perfect camouflage, dimensional phasing, and a hunting intelligence that borders on precognitive. No species has ever successfully domesticated or even communicated with a shadow maw. They exist solely to consume. Grixtal, a heavily armored Therian warrior whose species had fought the shadow maw for centuries, raised a massive claw. Professor, my people's military academies teach that encountering a shadow maw means immediate evacuation of the entire system. They are death incarnate. Precisely correct, Kethmer acknowledged, which brings us to our next specimen, the razor swarm. The hologram shifted to show what appeared to be a beautiful cloud of glittering particles until the view zoomed in to reveal millions of insectoid creatures, each no larger than a human thumb, but possessing mandibles that could slice through starship hulls. The swarm moved with perfect coordination, a single consciousness distributed across countless bodies. The razor swarm operates as a collective intelligence, the professor explained. They strip entire ecosystems bare, leaving nothing but polished rock. The last recorded encounter was the Vega incident. 3 billion inhabitants, consumed in 47 minutes. A nervous chittering arose from the insectoid Click-Tat students, their compound eyes reflecting the holographic swarm. Maya Patel, the only human in the class and a recent transfer from Earth's fledgling interstellar program, watched with clinical interest while making notes on her tablet. And finally, Kethmer's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than his normal tone. The Titan Crusher. The hologram exploded into a creature so massive it required the entire projection space, a behemoth of armored plates and crushing appendages that moved with surprising grace despite its moon-sized proportions. Its roar even filtered through. The projection system made the reinforced walls vibrate. The Titan Crusher represents pure physical dominance, the professor continued, capable of cracking planets, immune to all known weapons, and possessed of a territorial instinct that spans entire star systems. They are the reason the Andromeda commerce route was abandoned. As the hologram faded, Professor Kethmer swept his gaze across the class. These 3 species represent the absolute pinnacle of predatory evolution. They are the nightmares that keep entire civilizations awake, the monsters that prove the universe is not meant for the weak or unprepared. Maya raised her hand, a simple gesture that somehow drew everyone's attention. Professor, I had one as a pet. The classroom fell silent. Even the environmental systems seemed to pause in their humming. Professor Kethmer's crystalline form flickered with what might have been confusion. I'm sorry, Miss Patel. Could you repeat that? Maya looked around at the sea of shocked faces, compound eyes, optical sensors, and various other visual organs, all focused on her with expressions of horror and disbelief. I had one as a pet, she repeated calmly. Well, not exactly like those, but similar. His name was Rex. He was a German shepherd. The silence stretched until Grixtal's deep voice rumbled through the room. Domesticated an apex predator? Oh, Rex wasn't domesticated, Maya said with a slight smile. He was family. The aftermath of Maya's casual revelation sent ripples of chaos through the classroom. Zixandra, a graceful Aquarian whose skin shifted through nervous color patterns, was the first to find her voice. Impossible, she whispered, her gills fluttering rapidly. No species in the galactic database has ever successfully coexisted with apex predators. The biological imperative for dominance makes it, could you show us? Professor Kefmer interrupted, his academic curiosity overriding his shock. This Rex? Maya pulled out her personal tablet, swiping through photos, with the casual ease of someone sharing vacation pictures. The first image she displayed showed a large, furry creature with intelligent brown eyes and a lolling tongue, sitting obediently beside a young Maya in what appeared to be a dwelling's common area. The collective gasp from the class was audible, even through the translation systems. Several students actually backed away from the projection. That's a predator, Grixtel stated flatly. Look at those canine teeth, a powerful jaw structure. The alert posture indicating constant threat assessment. That's Rex being a good boy, Maya corrected, swiping to the next photo. This one showed the same creature lying upside down, all 4 legs in the air, with what appeared to be a smaller human, a child, using the creature's belly as a pillow while reading. Vekmer, a logical Vulnarian whose species prided itself on rational thought, began making rapid calculations on his personal device. The size differential suggests this predator could have terminated the smaller human with minimal effort. Yet it appears to be protecting? Rex loved kids, Maya said fondly. He was especially gentle with my little brother. Used to let Tommy dress him up in costumes for Halloween. She swiped again, revealing an image that broke several alien minds simultaneously. A fearsome predator sat patiently, while wearing what appeared to be a colorful fabric covering and a pointed hat, surrounded by small humans, who were clearly delighted rather than terrified. This is not possible, Zixandra managed, her skin now cycling through colors that didn't exist in most species' emotional spectrums. Apex predators don't. They don't wear clothing. It was a birthday party, Maya explained. Rex was 13, that's about 91 in dog years. He was getting pretty old by then, but he still loved parties. Especially if there was cake. Cake? Professor Kethmer's voice had risen to a frequency that made the universal translators strain. Well, dog-safe cake. Regular cake has chocolate, which is toxic to dogs. Mom always made Rex a special one with peanut butter and carrots. The classroom erupted in confused babbling as translation systems struggled to process concepts that had no equivalent in most alien languages. A predator that was old implied longevity beyond hunting prime. A predator that consumed cake suggested dietary choices beyond pure carnivory. A predator that participated in parties implied social structures that contradicted everything they knew about apex species. Clactos, a hive mind representative whose thoughts were shared among 17 bodies, spoke with the voice of collective confusion. We are experiencing cognitive dissonance. The data suggests impossible parameters. How did your species achieve dominance over such a creature? Dominance? Maya looked puzzled. We didn't dominate Rex. We were partners. He protected our home. We provided food and health care. He warned us about strangers. We gave him toys and walks and belly rubs. Belly rubs? Grixtal's translation system was clearly struggling with the concept. Maya swiped to another photo, showing her scratching the creature's exposed stomach while it displayed what could only be described as an expression of pure bliss. Dogs love belly rubs. Rex would roll over whenever anyone came near. He was such a good boy. But But how did you prevent it from hunting you? Vecmer asked, his logical mind grappling with contradictory evidence. Hunt us? Rex was a protector, not a hunter. Well, except for squirrels. He never caught one, but he sure tried. Maya's smile grew wistful. He passed away when I was in high school. Cancer. We were all there with him at the end. The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet of earlier. This was the silence of minds trying to process a reality that challenged everything. They thought they knew about the universe. Professor Kethmer's crystalline form had stopped refracting light entirely, a sign of deep contemplation among his species. Miss Patel, are you suggesting that your species forms emotional bonds ... with apex predators? Not just dogs, Maya said, warming to the topic. Humans keep all sorts of animals as companions. Cats, birds, reptiles, fish. Some people have pet snakes. Snakes? Zixandra's gills had completely stopped functioning. Venomous ones sometimes. All pythons are popular, though they're constrictors, not venomous. But some people keep cobra species with proper permits and safety equipment. The translation systems began emitting error signals as they encountered concepts that existed in no known xenological database. Asterisk. I think, Professor Kethmer said slowly, his crystalline form now pulsing with nervous energy, we need to examine this phenomenon more thoroughly. Miss Patel, could you perhaps provide additional context about your species' relationship with what you call pets? Maya nodded enthusiastically, seeming oblivious to the fact that she was causing several aliens to question their fundamental understanding of evolution and survival. Sure, where should I start? Perhaps with the origins of this partnership, the professor suggested, his academic mind struggling to categorize what he was hearing. Well, dogs evolved from wolves, Maya began, pulling up a new set of images. Wolves are pack hunters, really effective ones. They can take down prey much larger than themselves through coordinated attacks and persistence hunting. Grixtal's massive form shuddered. Wolves are known throughout the galaxy. They're classified as class of predators. My people's ancient. Texts speak of them with ... respect. Right, so about 15,000 years ago, some wolves started hanging around human settlements, probably for food scraps initially. Over time, the friendlier ones got more food, bred more successfully, and gradually we ended up with dogs. Your species deliberately encouraged the breeding of apex predators? Dekmer's logical mind was clearly overloading. We didn't just encourage it, Maya said, swiping to show dozens of different dog breeds. We specialized them. Hunting dogs, herding dogs, guard dogs, racing dogs, lap dogs. Each breed was developed for specific partnerships with humans. The images showed creatures ranging from massive bear-like animals to tiny, delicate beings that could fit in a human hand. All unmistakably predators, all displaying the same relaxed, friendly demeanor as Rex. But this suggests, Zixandra said, her color patterns now stabilizing into what appeared to be academic fascination, that your species identified the adaptive advantages of cooperation over competition. Exactly, Maya beamed. But it's not just dogs. Humans have domesticated or partnered with hundreds of species. Cats for pest control, horses for transportation, cattle for food and materials, bees for pollination services. Bees? Claketo's S-17 bodies spoke in unison, their hive minds struggling with the concept. Beekeeping is ancient. Bees aren't exactly pets, but they're partners. They pollinate our crops. We protect their hives and harvest surplus honey. It's symbiotic. Professor Kethmer began pacing, his forearms gesturing wildly. This challenges everything we know about apex species behavior. In every documented case, the introduction of a dominant predator to an ecosystem results in either territorial conflict or food chain displacement. That's because you're thinking about it wrong, Maya said gently. You're looking at it as dominance and submission, predator and prey. But what if it's not about dominance at all? What do you mean? Grixtol leaned forward, his warrior instincts intrigued despite his confusion. What if it's about mutual benefit? Dogs get reliable food, medical care, and protection from larger predators. Humans get companionship, security, and assistance with various tasks. Nobody's dominating anybody. We're just friends. Friends, Vecmar repeated, his translation system struggling with the concept. You're describing an emotional bond with an apex predator. Rex was more than a friend, Maya said, her voice growing soft. He was family. When I was sad, he'd put his head on my lap and stay there until I felt better. When I was sick, he'd lie beside my bed and not move until I was well. He celebrated when I came home from school, mourned when I left for college. The classroom had grown completely silent again. Even the environmental systems seemed to be holding their breath. And when he died, Maya continued, we all cried. We buried him in the backyard under his favorite tree, with his favorite toy and a photo of our family. We still visit his grave. You grieve for predators? Zix Andra's voice was barely above a whisper. We grieve for family, Maya corrected. And that's what they become? Not pets, not possessions, not controlled predators. Family. Professor Kethmer stopped pacing abruptly. Miss Patel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course. Are there other species on your world that exhibit similar behaviors? This partnership with apex predators? Maya tilted her head thoughtfully. Well, there are some interesting cases. Dolphins sometimes cooperate with human fishermen, guiding fish into nets in exchange for a share of the catch. Crows can learn to recognize individual humans and will sometimes bring gifts to people who feed them. And there are documented cases of wild wolves approaching humans for help when they're injured. But these are isolated incidents, surely, Vecmar protested. Anomalies that prove the rule rather than challenge it. Maybe, Maya said with a smile that somehow seemed to contain galaxies of knowledge. Or maybe the rule is wrong. Maybe cooperation is more powerful than competition. Maybe the real apex predators aren't the ones with the biggest teeth or the strongest claws. What do you mean? Professor Kethmer asked, though something in his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Maybe the real apex predators are the ones that convince all the other predators to be their friends. Asterisk, the shrill alarm that suddenly pierced the galactic xenobiology institute shattered the philosophical moment like crystalline glass. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the classroom as an automated voice announced in 17 languages. Code Black, containment breach in Section 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. Professor Kethmer's crystalline form flickered with alarm patterns. Section 7, that's the live specimen containment area. Everyone out now. The students began filing toward the exits with varying degrees of panic, but Maya remained seated, her head tilted as if listening to something beyond. The alarms. Miss Patel, we need to evacuate, the professor called. Professor, Maya said calmly, what specimens are kept in Section 7? That's classified information, but given the circumstances, juvenile versions of the species we've been studying. A young shadow maw, a small razor swarm cluster, and a titan crusher spawn. They're heavily sedated and behind multiple containment barriers. But if those barriers have failed, they're scared, Maya said simply, standing and walking toward the exit, not away from Section 7, but toward it. Miss Patel, what are you doing? Grixtal's massive form moved to block her path. Those creatures are not your Earth pets. They will kill you without hesitation. Will they? Maya asked, looking up at the towering warrior. Or are they just young, frightened animals trapped in a strange place? Before anyone could stop her, Maya had ducked under Grickstall's arm and was running down the corridor toward Section 7. The professor and several students followed, their various forms of locomotion, creating a bizarre parade of concern. They reached the security station overlooking Section 7 just as the scene unfolded below. The containment area was in chaos-shattered barriers, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows, and 3 of the galaxy's most feared predators loose in the chamber. The juvenile Shadow Maw was a writhing mass of darkness, about the size of a large dog, its form flickering between dimensions as it searched for escape routes. The Razor Swarm cluster, smaller than its adult counterpart, but still containing thousands of individuals, flew in agitated patterns around the chamber. The Titan Crusher spawn, only the size of a small building rather than a moon, was methodically testing the walls with its massive claws. Security forces had cordoned off the area, their weapons trained on the containment chamber, but nobody was moving to enter. The standing orders were clear. Containment. Breaches of this magnitude required orbital bombardment if the creatures couldn't be recontained remotely. They're going to destroy the entire facility, Professor Kethmer said, his voice hollow with the weight of imminent disaster. Maya was studying the scene below with the same clinical interest she'd shown during the lecture. They're not attacking the walls to escape, she observed. Look at the patterns. What patterns? Kethmer asked, his logical mind focusing on her words despite the chaos. The Shadow Maw keeps phasing back to the same corner. That's hiding behavior, not hunting. The Razor Swarm is flying in a tight defensive formation, not an attack pattern. And the Titan Crusher is making noise, but not actually damaging anything structural. What are you suggesting? Grickstall rumbled. I'm suggesting they're not trying to escape. They're trying to hide. They're babies, torn from their natural environments and kept in artificial habitats. The containment failure probably scared them more than it scared us. That's impossible, Professor Kethmer said, but his tone lacked conviction. Is it? Maya was already moving toward the emergency access hatch. There's one way to find out. Miss Patel, no. Multiple voices shouted simultaneously, but Maya had already opened the hatch and was climbing down the maintenance ladder into the containment chamber. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Shadow Maw's frantic phasing stopped as it turned toward Maya, its star-bright eyes focusing on her with what looked like curiosity rather than hunger. The Razor Swarm's defensive formation loosened, individual insects beginning to fly in. The exploratory patterns typically associated with investigation rather than aggression. Most remarkably, the Titan Crusher spawn, a creature whose adult form could crack planets, sat down heavily and made a sound that the universal translators couldn't process, but somehow conveyed a sense of confusion and longing. Maya approached. Slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. When she was about 10 feet from the Shadow Maw, she stopped and sat down cross-legged on the floor. "Hey there," she said softly, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "I know you're scared. New place, strange sounds, no family around. That's rough." The Shadow Maw rippled, its form solidifying slightly as it tilted what might have been a head toward Maya. "I had a friend once who was scared of new places too," Maya continued, her voice taking on the gentle tone she might use with a frightened child. "His name was Rex. He was a good boy, but thunderstorms used to terrify him. He'd hide under my bed and shake until the storm passed." The Razor Swarm had begun to settle, individual insects landing on various surfaces around the chamber, but maintaining their focus on Maya. The Titan Crusher spawn lowered its massive head until it was almost touching the floor, its eyes each one larger than Maya's entire body, blinking slowly. The thing about being scared, Maya said, now addressing all three creatures, is that it's okay. Being scared doesn't make you bad or wrong. It just means you need someone to help you feel safe. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something. That made the watching aliens gasp, a small, wrapped item that she opened to reveal some kind of food. Energy bar, she explained, breaking it into pieces. Probably not what you're used to, but it's what I've got. She placed the pieces on the floor, between herself and the creatures, then sat back. The Shadow Maw was the first to approach, its form flickering between dimensions as it investigated the offering. When it touched the food, its star-bright eyes widened with what could only be described as surprise. Good, right? Maya smiled. Chocolate chip. Well, carob chip. Real chocolate's not good for most males. One by one, the other creatures approached. The Razor Swarm sent individual scouts to investigate, and the Titan Crusher spawn extended one massive claw to delicately accept a piece of the offering dot above in the observation deck. Professor Kethmer was recording everything with shaking hands. "This is impossible," he whispered. "She's feeding apex predators from her hand." "No," Zixandra said, her skin patterns now showing colors that hadn't been seen before. "She's making friends." 3 hours later, the containment chamber had been transformed into something that no xenobiologist in the galaxy would have believed possible. Maya sat in the center of the space, surrounded by 3 of the universe's most feared predators, all of whom appeared to be ... content. The juvenile Shadow Maw had fully materialized and was lying beside Maya like an enormous cat, its form solid and almost peaceful. The Razor Swarm had formed a loose cloud around the group, individual insects occasionally landing on Maya's shoulders or arms without any sign of aggression. The Titan Crusher spawn had curled up as much as a creature of its size could manage, its massive head resting on the floor near Maya's feet. "This is going to change everything," Professor Kethmer said, his crystalline form now refracting light in patterns that indicated profound academic excitement. "Everything we thought we knew about apex predator behavior, about the fundamental nature of consciousness and cooperation. It's not just about behavior," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's communication system. "It's about understanding. These aren't mindless killing machines. They're individuals with their own personalities, their own needs, their own capacity for connection." She gestured to the Shadow Maw, who had begun making a soft purring sound. That seemed to resonate through multiple dimensions. "This one's curious. Probably the smartest of the 3. When I showed it how to make shadow puppets with the emergency lighting, it started trying to copy the shapes." Shadow puppets? Thekmer's logical mind was still struggling with the implications. Simple entertainment. You use light and shadows to make pictures on the wall. Children love it. Maya demonstrated, her hand creating the silhouette of what looked like a 4-legged creature. The Shadow Maw immediately responded, its form shifting to create a similar shape. "And the Razor Swarm?" Professor Kethmer asked, his academic curiosity now completely overriding his earlier alarm. "They're musicians," Maya said with delight. "Listen." She hummed a simple melody, and the Razor Swarm began to modulate their wing beats, creating harmonies that turned the chamber into a concert hall. The individual insects were communicating through rhythm and tone, creating complex musical structures that spoke to their collective intelligence. "Remarkable," Zixandra whispered. "They're not just mimicking her. They're improvising." "What about the Titan Crusher?" Grixtel asked, his warrior instincts still alert despite the peaceful scene. "Lonely," Maya said simply, reaching up to scratch behind what appeared to be an ear on the massive creature's head. "I think they're social creatures, but because of their size, they spend most of their time alone. When adults encounter each other, they probably fight because they don't know how to communicate their need for companionship." The Titan Crusher spawn made a sound that was part rumble, part sigh, and somehow conveyed a sense of contentment that was unmistakable regardless of species. "Miss Patel," Professor Kethmer said, his voice carrying a weight of realization. "Do you understand what you've accomplished here?" "I made some friends," Maya said, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. "You've proven that the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization are wrong," he continued. "For millennia, we've operated under the belief that apex predators are inherently hostile, that cooperation between species is impossible, that the only relationship possible between different forms of consciousness is dominance and submission." "Maybe," Maya said, gently disentangling herself from her new companions and standing up. "Or maybe we've just been asking the wrong questions." "What do you mean?" "Instead of asking, how do we control them? Or how do we defend against them? Maybe we should be asking, how do we understand them? And what do they need?" As if responding to her words, the three creatures began to move. The shadow maw flickered back to its corner, but now it was clearly a choice, rather than fear-driven hiding. The razor swarm formed a loose, relaxed formation around the chamber, continuing their musical communication. The Titan Crusher spawn settled into a resting position that somehow managed to look comfortable despite its massive size. "They're not trying to escape anymore," Zixandra observed. "Because they're not scared anymore," Maya explained. "They know they're safe. They know someone cares about them." "But what happens now?" Grixtel asked. "The Institute can't just keep them as pets." "Not pets," Maya corrected, walking toward the exit. "Partners. There's a difference." As she climbed the ladder back to the observation deck, Maya paused and looked back at the three creatures. "The thing about friendship," she said, "is that it's not about what species you are, or how big your teeth are, or how many dimensions you can phase through. It's about recognizing that we're all just trying to make sense of this universe, and maybe we're better at it when we do it together." She reached the observation deck and looked around at the assembled aliens, Professor Kethmer, Grixtel, Zixandra, Vekmer, Klektos, and the others. All of them were staring at her with expressions that ranged from wonder to disbelief to something that might have been hope. "You know," Maya said with a smile, "I think Rex would have liked you." He was always good at making friends with different kinds of people. Behind her, through the reinforced glass of the observation deck, three of the galaxy's most feared predators had settled into peaceful rest, their earlier panic replaced by something that looked remarkably like contentment. And in that moment, the future of galactic civilization began to change. Professor Kethmer began drafting a report that would shake the foundations of xenobiology. Grixtel started wondering if his people's ancient respect for wolves might be something more than mere military acknowledgement. Zixandra found herself thinking about her homeworld's abandoned cities, wondering if the monster that had driven her people away might simply have been misunderstood, because sometimes the most profound revolutions begin not with conquest or technology, but with a simple question: what if we tried being friends? Maya Patel, exchange student from a small blue planet called Earth, had just taught the galaxy that the most dangerous predator wasn't the one with the biggest teeth dot, it was the one that convinced all the other predators to be its friends. In the depths of space, on worlds where humanity had never set foot, apex predators began to sense something new in the cosmic wind, not the scent of fear or the promise of dominance, but the possibility of something they had never experienced. Before got the possibility of not being alone, the adventure was just beginning.